Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim daf Pedalet. Today's daf is sponsored by Adrian Rab Fund in honor of her friend and chavruta Joanna Ram on her birthday. And today's daf is sponsored by Dana Goldberg on the first year side of Mayor White's, Mayor Ben Yehoshua Valea. An Orthodox feminist, my grandfather was so proud of my Gemara knowledge, and even in his 101st year, always asked what Masechet I was learning. Okay, we're going to get started with our daf. I will point out, it went up a little bit late, but Gefet is up for this week on the very fascinating topic of on the Shabbat of Lo Berchu B'Torah Tchila. So you can listen to that about if you remember the Talmidei Chachamim, why their sons aren't Talmidei Chachamim, because they didn't make a bracha on Berchot Torah. So as I said at the time, it was a very interesting topic, and Rabbanit El Shimoni goes into depth into understanding it better. Different opinions worth listening to. Okay, we're now going to get started. We were in the middle. Let's review our Mishnah because it's going to be very important to understanding the daf for today. If she says, I am not going to benefit from everyone, the husband can't annul that vow. Why? Because it's not inui nefesh, because she can benefit from him. She can also take from the matnot aniyim, right? The gifts that are left for the poor people, because they're considered ownerless. So we had three different ways of understanding the connection between these things. The main point was that we had this debate whether we assume the way I just read it, which is her husband is not included when she says, I won't benefit from everyone. The second part of the Mishnah I'm going to leave aside. We'll get back to it at the end of today's stuff, but we'll read it then. So Rav Nachman had said basically the husband is not bichlal briot, which also the first opinion, Ula had said it, and Ula had said just these are two different reasons, that and the fact that she can also take the gifts for the poor, and that's why it's not inui nefesh, it's not considered affliction. The second opinion of Rav Nachman, the second reading in that way, again, Rava read it differently, Rav Nachman said it's actually describing two different situations. It's that when she's married to him, he can't nullify it now because, number one, while she's married to him, she can eat from him. When she's no longer married to him, she can still benefit from the gifts for the poor. So that's why it's not inui nefesh. To which Eitibe Rava le Rav Nachman. Now, Rava understood it differently and said, no, really, the husband is part of all people. She actually can't benefit from him. And the only reason why he can't nullify it is because she can eat the gifts from the poor. So Rava says to Rav Nachman, how could you possibly say, starting from the top of our daf, is the husband really not considered part of everyone else? When she makes a neder against all humans, it doesn't include her husband. What about the following Mishnah that we're going to see later in the chapter? If she says, I will not benefit from any Jews, which she really means in this case, it's obvious from the context there, that she means I will not have sexual relations with any Jews. Yafer chelko utehim shamashto. He can nullify the part that relates to him, that she's forbidden to him, and she can then have relations with him, okay, or he can have relations with her. Basically, the main point being, right, and tehena tulam in a Yehudim. In that case, she basically vowed against all Jews, which you would think, according to Rav Nachman, doesn't include her husband. And what does it say there? He nullifies the part that relates to him, which means that the vow does relate to him. So now we have a bit of a problem with the girsa. Our text is actually very complicated how to read it. There's many, many different interpretations, but I'm going to go with the girsa that's quoted in the Perush HaRosh. You can look at the bottom of your page. It's found on the right side in the middle there. This commentary here says basically that his commentary says that there's a problem with the text, and actually in some of the manuscripts show this text, and this makes a lot more sense, which is the obvious question that you would have asked had we not continued with the Gemara, which is, that is in our text, but the next line is not going to be. If you say the husband is not part of all of humankind, why does he have to nullify his part of the vow? In other words, the vow shouldn't apply to him at all. So why does he have to nullify it if it doesn't even apply to him, right? In our case, what did we say? He can't nullify it. Why can't he nullify it? Because it doesn't relate to him, right? That's how Rav Nachman understood it. Because she wasn't including him, and therefore she's not suffering at all because she can still eat from her husband and benefit from him. But in the case of the Nitulanim and the Yehudim, he actually has to nullify his part of the vow before he can have relations with her. It's actually forbidden. We assume that Kol Yehudim means everybody, including her husband. So now we have an issue because now one could say maybe Mina Yehudim means something different from this, but there's no reason to think that. To which the Gemara answers, again, there's different ways of how you punctuate and all that, but I'm going to read it like this. Based on that girsa, the first word of the next sentence is lo olam. Lo olam emelacha. Lo olam is a response that says, really, this is how you say it. Shanehacha demucha, and some people even get rid of all those words. But shanehacha, it's different here. In other words, these two Mishnayot are not the same at all. They're very different. Why? It's clear from the context of Nitulanim and Yehudim that she's including her husband. Why is it clear? When you take a vow, you're generally forbidding something that's permitted to you. Now, a married Jewish woman is not permitted to have relations with anybody other than her husband. So therefore, when she says, I am not having relations with anyone, she can't be meaning people who are already forbidden to her. I mean, she could be meaning them as well, but she's obviously including her husband there because who else is she talking about? There's no one else who she's permitted to at this point. So therefore, from the context, you can understand that in that place, that Mishnah, Mina Yehudim is actually including her husband because the context there is having relations, and relations are forbidden to her to everybody else in the world except her husband. So she must be referring to him. Whereas when she says, I won't gain financial benefit from anyone, she can gain financial benefit from anybody she wants in the world. There's no, right? A married woman doesn't have any issue taking some gift from somebody else or food from somebody else. So therefore, in our Mishnah, it obviously means everyone else and not her husband. In other words, the default is not her husband. But in the particular case where it's nobody else but her husband, it must mean the husband. So that's a very simple way of reading our sugya. As I told you, there are different ways to read this because our text in the Gemara doesn't actually say the difficulty is explained a little bit differently. In any case, the answer is still the same. And as I said, I'd rather read it from a text that seems to make a lot more sense. Okay, next. Okay, we're going to have three distinct sugyas today, although there'll be an overlap between the second sugya and the third. So she can benefit now, since she forbade herself from all people, but she can benefit from ownerless items, such as leket shechan pe'ah. Those are the things left for the poor people. Notice what's missing here. V'lo katane uv'ma'aser ani. It doesn't say the poor man's tithe. Okay, the tithes that are given to the poor people. What is that? In the first, second, fourth, and fifth year, if you remember, we've gone through this a lot, you take truma, you take ma'aser rishon, which goes to the Levi, you take ma'aser sheni, which you separate, and it goes, you have to bring it to Yerushalayim and eat it in Yerushalayim. But on years 3 and 6, you replace the ma'aser sheni and you give ma'aser ani. It's a tithe that goes to poor people. What is that, not ownerless also? So why doesn't it say it here? And furthermore, v'hatanya, it says in the braita, it says in the Gemara, it calls it a braita. It's funny. Usually they don't call it braitas. Again, another further proof that Nedarim has a bit of a different language. And it's actually a Tosefta. Okay. Again, braita means anything outside of the Mishna. Okay. In this case, it's actually found in the Tosefta. It says, uv'ma'aser ani. Now, the Tosefta says the same thing as our Mishnah, that a woman who forbids herself to benefit from anyone can eat leket shechan pe'ah. And there it adds, and ma'aser ani. So now we seem to have this contradiction between the Mishnah and the Tosefta. By the way, there's a study guide which has a lot of charts today, which charts things out. It's in Hebrew, but you can still follow in the charts. And if your Hebrew's good, then you can definitely follow. So now, Amar Rav Yosef lo kasha. Rav Yosef says the structure is going to be like this. Rav Yosef is going to bring an answer. We're going to have a little while understanding his answer. It's a little bit complicated. Then Abaye is going to reject his answer and say, you thought the subject of the debate between Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis we're going to see right now is the same as by us. It's not. Put his whole answer aside, and Rava is going to explain it in a different manner. Okay, so the first attempt is going to say the Mishnah and the Tosefta represent different opinions. In the end, we're going to say they actually represent different situations of Maaser Ani. But right now, we're going to suggest they represent different opinions, different tannaitic opinions, which happens often. Mishnah is one opinion, the Tosefta quotes a different opinion, that could possibly be. But what's the opinion? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbanan. It's going to divide between Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis, as appears in the following Mishnah. Ditna. This is a Mishnah in Demai. Demai, okay, I want you to make clear. Right now, we're talking about Maaser Ani, regular Maaser Ani. But in order to figure out what the machloket is between the Tosefta and the Mishnah, we're going to bring a case where there's a doubt about whether Truma and Masrot were taken. Now, what's the case usually of doubt, Demai? It's when you buy fruits, produce, something from an haaeretz. If you remember haaeretz, they're suspect about certain things. We don't trust them. So one of the things they're not trusted in is mas. Okay, they don't necessarily tithe their produce. Why? Because it's a financial loss. Okay, so now if you get produce from them, you have to take maser. Okay, for example, you have to take maser for the Levi, the 10th that goes to the Levi. You have to take maser rishon. We assume that they didn't, maser sheni, we assume they didn't do this. However, or maybe maser sheni, I don't know, I'm not going to get into maser sheni right now, but now there's a debate. What do you do about maser ani? Because first of all, even if I separate maser ani, okay, now, even maser rishon, all these have a bit of an issue about it, which is, we don't really know if they took the tithes or not, okay? We don't know. So it's possible I have to give this to the poor people. It's also possible I don't. So what happens? That creates a situation where in comes the halacha called hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. Whoever wants to take something from me, like if you're poor and you want to take the maaser ani, you have to prove that it wasn't taken before and that I really owe it to you. It's not clear here. So nobody thinks that I actually have to give it to the poor people. However, the question is, do I have to at least designate it as maaser ani or not? What's the issue? Well, normally if I have a pile of produce, until I take my trumot, until I take my masrot and all that, it's called tevel. Tevel is forbidden, okay? Even though, let's say I have a pile worth $100, even though let's say only a few dollars are right about 80, I forget how it all comes out, but a 50th to the that, then a 10th to the right. So let's say I'm down to 98 and then a 10th of that. So 9.8 is going to go to the Levi and then another 10th. Okay. So part of it is not really going to be mine, but most of it is mine. But until I separate my trumot and masrot, that whole pile is forbidden to me because that's called tevel. It's forbidden. In fact, it's a davar sheish lo matirin because I'll eventually fix it. So if it gets mixed up, it's actually more of a problem. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that whole thing. But the Mishnah says that if I have this suffix, now if it's definitely tevel, right, that's one thing. But now there's a question, I don't even know if maaser ani was taken or not. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer, what do? Do I have to take maaser? Let's say, I assume you didn't take maaser. So I take maaser rishon. I have to take that out of suffix. But what about the maaser ani? So Rabbi Eliezer says, Ein adam tzarich likrot shem al maaser ani shel demai. Not only do I not have to give it to a poor person because the burden of proof lies on him and he can't prove that it wasn't taken. Again, this is all because we have no idea what the haaeretz did. But not only do I not have to do that, I don't even know if you've ever taken trumot or masrot, one of the things you do is you say, the fruits on this side are going to be truma and the fruits on this side are going to be mas. So I don't have to call it by name. I don't have to say the fruits on the northern part of the pile are maaser ani. I don't even need to call them maaser ani. Meaning, really, in other words, there's no laws of tevel by maaser ani here. Because and what the Ran is going to explain, because it's not so clear why that is, that Rabbi Eliezer holds basically that since once I separate the maaser ani, theoretically, it's not forbidden. It's not like a maaser, which is designated for the Levi, and truma, which is designated to the Kohen, and I can't eat. I theoretically could take the maaser ani. How is that? By the way, I can declare all my property ownerless, and I can become poor, and then I can eat it. So it's not like a forbidden item that I can't eat. And therefore, once I separate, and particularly in this case, since hamotzi mechavero alav haraya, I don't even have to make myself ownerless to be able to eat it. I can eat it myself, right? Without declaring myself a poor person, because since we don't know if the ani can't take it because he has no proof that it wasn't taken before, and therefore I can eat it myself. So once I can eat it, he says the following, a very logical argument. When it's in the pile, that's when we wanted to call it tevel and say the whole thing's forbidden because I haven't taken maaser ani. So if you want to say that whole thing is forbidden, but once I separate the maaser ani, I can actually eat the maaser ani, And the maaser ani is what's causing it to be tevel. That makes no sense. It's counterintuitive. If I can eat it once I separate it, because it's not forbidden, it's not like for the Levi or for the Kohen. So of course, when it's in the pile and most of the pile is things I can eat, of course the pile is not going to be problematic and forbidden, which is why in a case of a suffix, and if I don't know if maaser ani was taken, comes Rabbi Eliezer and he says, you don't need to separate anything. You don't even need to designate it. You don't need to do anything because it's not tevel. Your pile is not tevel. But what this has to do with us, we don't know yet. Hold off, okay? Because right now, it doesn't seem like it's connected. We're now on Amud Bet. The rabbis distinguish. They say, listen, a pile of tevel is a pile of tevel, however you want to call it. It's forbidden. You didn't take maaser ani, it's a problem. Take maaser ani, say the produce on the northern side of the pile is, or southern side, doesn't matter what, is maaser ani, but then you can eat the whole thing. You don't have to separate it out and say, oh, this is maaser ani, this has to go to the poor. No, because they agreed the ani can't get it because, again, this is all a case of doubt. We don't know, okay? So the basic machloket between them, now, what's the basis for their machloket? So the Ran explains that there's a gzeira shava here between, it says in the pasuk, lo tuchal le'echol b'sharecha maaser deganchati roshcha v'yitzarecha, etc., which is you can't eat in your gates the maaser that's supposed to go to the Levi, okay, and all that. And then it says, v'achlu b'sharecha b'saveh, when it talks about maaser ani, it says, and you should eat it in your gates. The poor people will eat it in your gates and they will be satiated. And they make a gzeira shava between the two. And they say what's true for maaser is true for maaser ani. So even though in the end, you can eat this maaser ani, if you don't call it by name though, first call it by name, say this is maaser ani, your whole pile is forbidden. Again, it's forbidden here only out of doubt, but it's forbidden. And basically the main thing is, he says, basically, all the laws that apply for maaser apply to maaser ani as well. Okay, even though in this case, you're going to end up eating the maaser ani yourself because the ani can't prove that it's his or hers. So basically, now let's read it inside. My love. Now, what does this have to do with us? Now we're going to jump to something else. But my love, lemanda amar sfeiko tovel. I want you to get the lingo here. Sfeiko tovel means if there's suffix, whether maaser ani was taken or not. Again, this is after you have this to my produce. You bought it from an haaeretz, or he gave it to you, or she gave it to you as a gift. And you don't know, you've taken the ones that you have to take, okay, that are clear, like the maaser rishon, for example. But you're still not sure whether maaser ani was taken. It's year 3 or 6. So the rabbis say, sfeiko tovel, this pile is forbidden to you until you call it by name and say the fruits on the right or whatever it is are maaser ani. You still could eat it yourself, but until you do that, you can't. Well, he would also hold, here comes the key, hasavar itle tovat hana'ah. One thing we know about Truma and Maaser, and we've talked about this a number of times, is that you can decide who you want to give it to. So if you say that sfeiko tovel, because the rabbi's position is we're going to learn whatever's true for Maaser Rishon is going to be true for Maaser Ani, then we're going to say, then also you get to choose which poor person you want to give it to. Again, not in our suffix case. That's why we're comparing. We wanted to go to our case where we're talking about regular maaser ani, real legit maaser ani, 100%, not doubt maaser ani. When it's in doubt, you don't have to give it to anybody. But if you're going to say that you have to, that the pile with the maaser, the suffix, maybe there was maaser ani mixed in, is going to make that whole pile tevel, and you're going to be strict about it and say it has all the laws like regular tithes. Then you're going to say it has all the same laws, which is when it comes to maaser ani and you took your, like at shechan peah, for example, you can't decide who to give it to. You leave it in the field and they collect it. Maaser ani, according to Chachamim, this is what who was it? Rav Yosef is saying, he's going to hold that you get to choose who you want to give it to. Okay, now, what does that mean? That means if I get to choose who I want to give it to, and that means basically, once I designate maaser ani, now we're not talking about a case of doubt. We're going to our case. What was our case? The woman swore she wasn't made a vow. I'm not going to benefit from anybody. It says she can collect leket, shechan peah. And then the question is, can she collect maaser ani as well? That was a debate, Mishna Tosefta. So he's going to say like this. If you say like Chachamim, that Sveikot Tovel, that if it's a case of doubt, it's going to be considered Tevel, meaning equals, it has all the same laws as Maaser. That means it also has the same laws as relates to Tovat Hana'ah, which means that if let's say, I swore, I vowed, I'm not going to benefit from anybody, and someone has Maaser Ani, can I take it? Okay. If they have Tovat Hana'ah, that means they can choose who they give it to. That means that until they've given it, it's theirs. It's owned by them. So that means I can't take Maaser Ani. That's our Mishnah. Our Mishnah doesn't list Maaser Ani because Maaser Ani is different. Because there's Tovat Hana'ah, there's benefit. Okay, again, let's explain what Tovat Hana'ah is. We're going to see this. I told you Sugya 2 and 3 are connected. Sugya 3 is going to all be about Tovat Hana'ah. Tovat Hana'ah means when you designate your tithes, you can choose who you want to give it to, and that has value to you. Why does it have value? Soon we're going to get to this machloket. Is it considered financial value or not? Okay, but why does it have value? Because if I give it to this poor person, they're going to owe me one. Okay, they're going to feel indebted to me somehow. And if they're going to feel indebted to me, then that's worth something to me. So that basically means it's mine. If I get to choose, it's still mine. It's not hefker like the leket shechan pe'ah, which I can't choose. So that's why our Mishnah mentions one and not the other. And let's keep going. Okay, so then it says, V'kevan de'ilei tovat hana'ah, since there's tovat hana'ah for the owner, whoever has this maaser ani in their possession, lo mahanya. Therefore, the person who vowed to not benefit from anybody can't get maaser ani. Ulamanda amal, but Rabbi Eliezer, who said, Eino koreshem, you don't have to, in the safek case, the doubt case, you don't have to call it by name. Kasaval sfeko eino tovel. He holds because the pile is not a problem. It's not called tevel anymore. If only maaser ani is the only thing that's left as a question, it's no problem. You can eat it because he doesn't think it's just like all laws of maaser. And if he doesn't think it's all like all laws of maaser, kosher sfeko tovel, right? Lately tovat hana'ah. We're going to assume those two things go together, which is if you say that the pile itself is not called tevel, if there's a doubt, maybe you didn't take the maaser ani, then you're also going to say that you don't get to choose who you give your maaser ani to because we don't learn from all the other regular maaser laws to maaser ani. It's something different. It's more like all the other gifts to the poor, which are basically ownerless, which means you can't choose who you give it to. In which case, in our Mishnah, right, or in this case, it's going to be the Tosefta. The Tosefta is going to say, in the case like our Mishnah, where the woman vows not to benefit from anybody, she can actually take maaser ani because maaser ani is ownerless. The owner has no rights to choose who they want to give it to, and therefore, basically, anyone can benefit from it, even if you're forbidden to benefit from all human beings, because this is not a human being. This is ownerless. Okay, that's the machloket. Actually, after being very convoluted, it seems pretty clear cut. One holds that maaser ani is ownerless, and one holds maaser ani is not ownerless, right? You can explain that whole very complicated thing in very clear, easy words, which is, does the owner have the rights to give it, in which case they own it still, or does the owner have no rights to choose who it goes to, in which case it's ownerless? Once it's ownerless, she can obviously benefit. If it's not ownerless, she can't benefit. Simple. Even though it was not so simple to get there. But even though it sounds very nice and simple and neat, Amarle Abaye, no, you misunderstood the machloket. The machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanit and Demai about the safek case. Nobody thinks that this pile is not considered tevel. They all think it's tevel. Okay, if there really is a doubt. The question is there really a doubt here or not? Now, why are Amei Haaretz suspect? They're suspect on things where there's a financial loss for them. They don't want to lose out on their produce, right? It's hard to take part of your produce and give it to somebody else. So when there's a financial loss, like, for example, giving the maaser to the Levi, we suspect that they didn't do it. But maaser ani, it's debatable whether there's a financial loss or not. Why is that? Well, let's read. Rabbi Eliezer savar, if there really was a doubt, of course you'd have to designate maaser ani from the pile. It's true the poor people wouldn't be able to collect it, but you would at least have to say, here's my maaser ani, because there's no way. Okay, that's what Abaye says. He disagrees with Rav Yosef about that. But Rabbi Eliezer Rabbanan b'hakam b'fliya, this is their machlok. Rabbi Eliezer savar lo nechshedu amei haaretz al maaser ani. it's not one of the things we suspect them of not taking. We assume all Amei haaretz take maaser ani. Why? Well, kevan de'ilu mafkir nichse v'have ani v'shakele hu leitle pseida. Well, if you really don't want to part with this produce, you can still take maaser ani and eat it yourself. How so? This is what we call about declaring bankruptcy, right? You declare bankruptcy to basically get rid of paying some of your debts. So it's very similar. The poor, the Am haaretz, okay, any person can do this, not necessarily an Am haaretz, but if we're worried, if we think he's so worried about the money, he can do the following. He can separate maaser ani, and then he can declare all of his property hefker. He can say, I'm making all my property ownerless, which is equivalent to, let's say, declaring bankruptcy, saying, I don't own any of this, but what's different about it is, as soon as everything is ownerless, okay, what can happen? Anyone can come and take it. So let's say at 8 a.m., I declare all my property ownerless. At that moment, I can take the maaser ani because now I'm poor. I can make myself poor. We've seen this before. I can make myself poor. Then I can take the maaser ani for myself so I don't lose it. And then at 8:03, let's say, I then say, oh, my property, it's ownerless. Great. I'm taking ownership of it. And then I bring it back to mine. Okay. So I basically declare bankruptcy for a minute. Okay. And in that minute, I basically acquire my maaser ani. So if you remember, there's a debate about how long you have to do it for and whether people hear or not hear. Anyway, we're going to leave that aside for right now. But theoretically, there's a way to do it. So because there's a way to do it, Rabbi Eliezer says that all the Amei haaretz, if they really care this and they don't want to lose it, they have a way around it. There's a loophole. So because of that, they take the maaser ani. Either they don't care. In other words, not all Amei haaretz are money hungry and worried about losing that little bit. So either they've given it to the poor people or they've come up with a solution about how they can take it themselves. But yes, they've separated it halachically. Yes, it might be an unpleasant loophole, but they can use this loophole and therefore they must be trusted. And that's why you don't have to start calling it by name because we can assume it's already taken. And then it has absolutely nothing to do with our issue. Okay, we're trying to find some difference between the Mishna and the Tosefta, why maaser ani is included, why it's not. And Rav Yosef tried to connect it to this machlok. It comes Abaye and says, that's not the machloket at all. You misunderstood. Rabbanan Safre, the rabbis, why do they think you have to call it by name? Because he thinks the Amei haaretz don't take trumot the maaser ani. Why? Well, for obvious reasons. Nobody's going to make all their property ownerless. Why? It could be someone else will come along in those 3 minutes and take their property. So why would you do that? You don't want to, right? You don't want everyone coming in and saying it's a free for all. What if, to save on that little bit of maaser ani, I'm basically going to risk all of my possessions? And therefore they are suspect that they didn't take trumot masrot. So that was, again, it was a very long-winded, but really all we had so far was braita Tosefta. One mentions the Tosefta mentions maaser ani, the Mishnah doesn't mention maaser ani. Rav Yosef tried to say it's a machloket Rabbi Eliezer rabbis, and Abaye says, no, you misunderstood the machloket, it has nothing to do with it. Comes Rava, and he explains, as I said earlier, one was to say they represent two different opinions. Rava is going to say they represent two different stages of maaser ani. Like, when did you separate the maaser ani? And that's going to affect whether or not it's ownerless or you have the rights to give it to whoever you want. And that's going to be the distinction Mishnah braita. Rava omer kam b'maaser ani hamitchalek b'toch habayit. If you bring the produce into your house and then you separate the tithes in your house, which is a way to do it, there it says in the pasuk, dichtiva be nitina. It says there, right, when you finish, ki tichlela aser kol maaser tvoatcha b'shana shlishit, shnana maaser, you give to the Levi, lager, liyatom, amana, b'chlu b'sharecha v'savei. That's describing a situation, Rava says, where you brought it into your house, and there it says, natatala leviim, and the ger and the atom. There it describes this giving of the maaser, and included in there is the maaser ani, because it's in the 3rd year. And basically what he's trying to say is that there, mishum hachi asur le tanuye. There you get to choose who you give it to when you take the tithes from in your house. You get to choose who to give it to, and because of that, you have what's called tovat hana'ah. you can choose, which means it's not ownerless. It's still owned by you until you give it to the poor. So that's why if someone forbade themselves from benefiting from you, like in our Mishnah, they can't take maaser ani, because our Mishnah was referring to maaser ani that came from your house. But kan b'maaser hani hamitchalek betoch hagranot. But if you're still in the fields and you're out there and you have this pile and you take the maaser ani there, then it's already like leket shechan pe'ah, right? It's like what you leave out in the fields for the poor. And there it says, kevan dechtive, this is a totally different pasuk. That was in Devarim chapter 26. This is in Devarim chapter 14. It says, miktzeh shalosh shanim totzi et kol maaser tvuatcha, take out all the maaser, b'shana ahi v'hinachta b'sha'arecha, and leave it outside in your gates. Notice the wording. It's not natata, you give it. Hinachta, leave it. So they distinguish and they say, the ones that are taken when you're in the field still, that you designate, that you separate, then those you have to leave. Those are ownerless. You don't get to choose who you give it to. And that's what the Tosefta was talking about. And that's why it's together with leket shechan and pe'ah. So instead of saying the Mishnah and the Tosefta represent two different opinions, tannaitic opinions, and there's a machloket, say in the end, no, there's no machloket. They represent two different types of maaser. It all depends on where you separated the tithes. If you're out in the fields, then it has the law of everything else in the fields, and you have to leave it outside. And that's based on this drasha and the pasuk, or the literal reading of the words, hinachta, you leave it there, as opposed to what was in your house, which says natata, you get to choose who you give it to. Okay, third sugya. Kohanim, Leviim, Nehanim, lo li yitzlu. Okay, let's go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, if I say, all Kohanim and all Leviim, Levites, Nehanim li, none of them, right? Konam, I skipped the word konam, but Kohanim, Leviim, Nehanim li, I vow, none of them can benefit from me. Yitlu al korcho. They can come in and take my stuff, okay? Take the truma and the maaser that's supposed to be given to them. Kohanim elu, ulevim elu, but if I designate certain Kohanim and certain Levim, then yitzlu acherim. Others can take the gifts, but they can't because they specifically were forbidden. So now the Gemara is going to say that there's actually a contradiction between the first line here and the second line here. Why? And something implied from it. So Kohanim Leviim Nehanim Yitzlu v'chule. Alma tovat hanaa eina mamon. They say the following. Okay, now you have to get into this machloket of is tovat hanaa. Whether you have tovat hanaa is one thing, but assuming there is tovat hanaa, does that have financial value? Okay. So for example, if someone steals from my property, I have produce that I separated truma to maschot, okay, and I have like a pile of truma. If that has financial value to me, let's say it's $100 worth of truma, and let's say I choose which Kohen, that has a value. Maybe it's $5 worth of value, right? So $5 of that pile is actually mine, because even though I'm going to give him $100, eventually I'll get back $5 worth from him, okay? This is just, right? Obviously, I'm not going to get money back from him, but he'll do me a favor that's worth something down the road. Do we view it like that or not? Okay? Or do we say a favor doesn't exactly have a financial number to it, and therefore it's not considered money? Okay, what will be the relevance if someone steals it from me? Is it mine? Do they have to return to me or not? Or kefel, maybe, do they have to pay the double payment or not? Obviously, they might have to return what they stole, but do they have to pay me the double payment on it? Because is it mine or is it not mine, right? It might not really be mine. So that's a whole debate that comes up in other places in Shas about is tovat hana'am mamon or not? Does it have a value to it, a financial value? Which has all sorts of ramifications. So if you say, and our sugya is going to be one of them, if you say Kohanim or Leviim, no Kohanim or Leviim can benefit from me. The Mishnah says they can come and take. Now, if you say that whoever takes it, right, that it has financial value to me, for me to be able to choose who to give it to is mamon. It's basically worth something to me. So this pile of 100, let's say $5 worth, is really mine, okay, because I own, because it's worth money to me. Then what's the problem? It's mine. They can't take it from me because they're forbidden to benefit from me. Okay? So Alma, from the first line, you can infer tovat hana'ah eina mamon. It must not be worth anything because, again, it has to be that this is owned by Kohanim and Leviim in general, because it can't be owned by me. If it's owned by me and it has financial value for me, then, and they can't benefit from me, then they can't take it from me at all. But ema seifa, but the second line, if I say Kohanim elu, ulevim elu nehenim li, right? You and you who are Kohanim and Levim can't take from me, but there's many other Kohanim and Levim who I didn't forbid. Well, yitlu achirim aval lahane lo, but those can't. Now, why can't they take it from me? If you say that there's, the only reason could be alma tovat hana mamon. If you say tovat hana isn't mamon, and you say it's not worth anything, then meaning to me, okay, that's the first part. Then the Kohanim and Levim who I forbade to benefit from, they should be able to take it just like I could take leket shechan peah in the previous example, because it's ownerless. This is not ownerless. This is, has the title on it, owned by a Kohen or owned by a Levi, which means it's not owned by me at all because it has no financial value to me. So if I said you and you, and it says you can't take it, that must mean it's because it's owned by me. So the first part of the Mishnah and the second part of the Mishnah, of this part of the Mishnah, contradict. Because the first one assumes that tovat hana'ah has no value. And that's why if I forbade any Kohanim and Levim, they can come take it anyway because it has the name Kohen on it and I have zero connection to it. The second assumes I have connection to it because you and you can't benefit from me and therefore you can't come and take it. So we seem to be stuck here because the first part of the Mishnah contradicts the second part of the Mishnah. So today we're going to see one resolution, which is going to be immediately rejected in tomorrow's daf. And we'll go a teeny bit into tomorrow's daf because we're going to be in mid-sentence here. Amar Rav Hoshaya, lo kashya Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Says, oh, this is not a difficulty. Each line of the Mishnah, okay, we tried this before with the Tosefta and the Mishnah to say each represents a different opinion. That makes a lot more sense. To say this about two lines of the Mishnah is a little bit radical. This line represents one person's opinion. This line represents someone else's opinion. Once in a while we do this. Sometimes they say it in the words tafra misha shanazo lo shanazo. Break the Mishnah in half, right? And split those two lines. This is one opinion. This is another opinion. Maybe because this is Nedarim and they have a bit of a different language. They don't use that language, but that's really what they're doing. And it is a method they use, but it's usually a pretty much last resort because it's hard to say that this one, right? This thing that we read as if one continuum is two different opinions. What are the two different opinions? So we're going to see Tanya, as it says in a braita. Hagonev tivlo shel chavero v'achalo. Let's say I have a pile of produce that I didn't take truma to maschot yet from. Okay, this is why I said this sugya connects to the previous because it's again this idea of tevel, untithed produce, which basically is a mix of, even though I haven't separated the tithes yet, but it's a mix of things that are going to eventually belong to the Kohen, things that will belong to the Levi, okay, and things that will belong to me. So most of it, right, 80-something% or something like that, or maybe a little less, is going to be mine. So what if somebody steals it? Mishalem lo demei tivlo divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says you get back the entire value. Okay, it's all yours. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, eno mishalem ela demei chulin shabo. You calculate how much of it would ended up going to tithes, and you take that out because that wasn't mine for him to have to return. Okay, because it's right. I have this whole pile, but eventually all these parts are not going to be mine, so he doesn't have to return that to me at all. So my labak hamiflage, is this not the machloket? To Rebbe savar tovat hana amamon. Rebbe says you have to give it back. Why? Because it has financial value to me. It's still because I can decide who to give it to. It's considered mine because that has financial value to me. By the way, there's a debate about whether you have to return. Remember, I said let's say it's $100 worth of truma. Then what's my tovat hana is $5 worth. So there's a debate about whether when Rebbe says here, you have to return me the whole thing because it's tovat hana is mamon, because it has financial value. Does it mean you only have to return to me the $5 out of the 100 of truma? Or do you have to return to me the entire value of the truma? That's an interesting debate among the commentaries, but either which way, the point is he views it as all belonging to me. Until I give it to the Kohen, it's mine because I can choose who to give it to, and that itself has financial value. That's why if you steal it from me, I get all the money back. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Sovel, tovat hana ein mamon. He says, no, you don't get back that value because it really all belongs to, it will eventually belong to the Kohen of the Levi. And you might get to choose, but it's not worth money. We don't view that. Yeah, you'll get a favor back, maybe. First of all, you don't even know if you'll get a favor back. It's not like a done deal. Someone will definitely do a favor for you just because you gave them truma or maser. And even if they will, like we don't put a monetary value on that. And then we basically say, the first part of the Mishnah, which said they can come take it from you, even though you forbade them. That's Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, who says there's no financial value. This is basically theirs. So they can come and take it from you because that's not benefiting from you. And the second line, which implies that if you said this and this, right, you can't come take it. That implies you can't come take it because it's mine and it has financial value to me. That matches up with Rebbe. Okay, so that's where we are right now, but you can already see the next word is lo. No, that's not the machloket. And then we're going to move on from there and see where we go. So with that, wishing everyone a great day. And remember to sign up for the Siyum. We're really just a few days away. Looking forward to finishing the Masechet soon. Wishing everybody a great day. Bye.